tonight, so thank you everyone for coming. You are in for a treat. Hello and welcome to tonight's Commonwealth World Affairs program. I'm Emily Chang. I'm the host and executive producer at Bloomberg Originals. It is my pleasure now to introduce Gretchen Whitmer, Governor of Michigan, author of True Gretch, what a name. She's out now with the young adult version of the book, Lessons for Anyone Who Wants to Make a Difference. Governor Whitmer is a lifelong Michigander who ran for office at age 29. 29. She served in both state houses and has never lost an election. She's focused on fighting for reproductive rights, ensuring affordable access to health care, defending democracy, among many other things. Governor Whitmer, welcome to the Commonwealth Club. Thank you.
Go white! Go white!
Woo. It's a lively audience tonight.
Well, Spartans are crazy people. There's my Spartans. All right. Michigan State Spartans in the house.
Okay, so I thought we'd really rev people up and start strong. I understand your mantra, or one of your mantras, is "It's Shark Week." You say it. Tell us what it is.
All right. So I'll reverse a little bit and go into the story. So when I was running for governor the first time, I was endorsed by Emily's List, and I was getting ready for my first debate. And they sent a debate coach to come and work with me. And I'd been in office before then, but I'm always eager to learn how to be a better messenger. And so I was excited for this. And ironically, Emily's List sent a man to give me debate advice, this women's organization. But he was great, gave me a lot of great advice. But one of the things he said was, the happy warrior always wins the debate. If you can turn off the volume and look and see who looks like they're having a little more fun, that's probably the person that wins the debate. He said, so my suggestion to you is when you walk into the debate, go right to the podium and take out your pen and put a big smiley face at the top of your paper so you remember to smile. I mean, has anyone ever told you to smile made you want to smile? It makes you want to punch their nose, right? So I was like, okay, it's a good suggestion, but that's not going to make me smile. And I was trying to think about what would. And in the meantime, between that debate coach and the debate, I went to go see Kevin Hart at Little Caesars Arena, downtown Detroit. And one of the guys opening for him did a monologue, and he was talking about how empowered women are today. And women are really empowered. It used to be, back in the day, if you wanted to see your girlfriend, but she was menstruating, she wouldn't tell you. She'd say something coy like, Aunt Flo is in town. And he said, nowadays, if you talk to your girlfriend and, it's that time of the month, she'll say, oh, you're not coming over because it's Shark Week, mother. Hilarious, right? So for my debates, instead of a smiley face, I wrote SW, MF on the top of my notes. And I love it because it's, it's kind of it's a nod to women's empowerment, but it also kept me loose and kept me as the happy warrior.
The happy and wild warrior, because you are pretty straight up in your book about being kind of a wild child in high school. What was it like growing up True Gretch?
Well, I talk a lot about my parents and my grandparents in this book and my siblings. When I was writing this book, I wrote it because the question that I got more often than not when I was running for re-election was, why on earth do you want to keep doing this? In my first term, I had a polar vortex to navigate 3 weeks into the job, and I know I'm here. You've got your own series of weather events to deal with, but we had a convergence of 3 storms, and it was negative 55 degrees out. A power company had a fire at one of their plants, and we were worried about losing power for 1 million people overnight. And that was just the beginning of my first term as governor. Pandemic, demonstrations for racial justice in the wake of George Floyd's murder, 32 recall attempts against me. I mean, Gavin had one. I'm joking because his was way more serious than any of mine were. We're friends. It's just a joke. But on top of it, there was a plot to kidnap and kill me.
Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about that.
And so the question of why do you want to run again, it was an understandable question. But for me, there was no doubt that I needed to not just run, but win, to show that this kind of behavior is not going to get rewarded. I'm not going to turn away, and I'm not going to lose this. And so I wrote this book to really put out 10 things that I learned over the course of my life that helped me as governor navigate all the ups and downs. And I'm very honest about it. You know, I'm a flawed human being. I am not perfect. Mm-hmm. One of my favorite and least favorite quotes in the book is from my father, who in my first election, someone interviewed him when I was running for the State House of Representatives in 2000, and they said, you know, what do you think about your daughter running? Is she ready for this? And he said, well, Gretchen knows she's not special. like, it sounds terrible, right? But what he meant was, and I know he meant this because he's always taught my siblings and me this, is we're not better than anybody else. We're human beings. No one is born better than anyone else. And we have a duty to, if we've got opportunities to help others, we have a duty to serve. And I think that's really what the book was all about, putting out some light in what I knew would be a heavy year, the election year last year. I had no idea how heavy and how long we would have this moment in our country, but that's what it's all about. And so I'm pretty raw in sharing what
very raw
life's really like. Yeah. But I don't think I'm better than anyone else. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've learned from it, and it's all helped me be the leader that I am today.
Speaking of your family, I mean, you grew up in a political family. Your mom worked for the Michigan Attorney General. Your dad was a Republican, worked for many Michigan governors. When you went down your political path, did it feel like kind of a, destined to be or a birthright, or is it something you rebelled against?
You know what? Both my folks are lawyers, and my master plan, I was talking to these bright young women here who are co-presidents in the Model UN, by the way. They're way ahead of the game from where I was.
Yes, Melissa and Ava in the audience.
And but when I was their age, I thought I was going to be a sports broadcaster. That's what my master plan was. And when I was at Michigan State, right down the road from the state capitol, my father suggested that I go do an internship down at the Capitol, that so few people understand government. And state government in particular was so accessible, and that I should go check it out. And maybe I hate it, but maybe I learned something and fall in love with it. And I'm really glad that he suggested that. It changed everything for me. I became very passionate about public policy and thought that this might be, a way for me to do good work that I feel really good about, and that makes a difference for people, and it changed everything for me. So it was not something I was destined to do, but something that I grew to really appreciate the importance of.
Now, you famously, I don't know if you're wearing it today, but rep your home state all the way down to your lipstick.
Yep.
Lip Bar, right? A Detroit brand.
Yes.
Are you wearing it today?
I'm not. I've been taking so much allergy medicine. I'm so dry, so I've got like lip gloss on today. But I always try to support women businesses and Black women businesses. If there are, great products that come out of Michigan, it's the greatest thing. So the Lip Bar is this business in Detroit, Michigan, and she makes these fabulous lipsticks, and I was wearing one of the bright pink ones so often. Pink's a big color in my life.
I believe it was called Playmate.
It was called Playmate, but I wore it so much, and so many people went to buy it because I was repping it that they've changed it to Big Gretch.
Yeah. On that note, you don't seem to hide your femininity, but use it as a tool for empowerment. Can you explain that? Because it is somewhat different from many women politicians, female, business leaders who felt that they can't do that.
I feel really fortunate. At 54 years old, I am the first in some ways, but I am not the first in many ways. And I recognize all the women who walked through the fire before me made it easier for me to show up as I am. Governor Jennifer Granholm, who you are very familiar with, she was our former energy secretary and native Californian. She was the first woman governor in Michigan. And, when you look at Governor Granholm's portrait in the Michigan Capitol, it reminds me that as the first, she was very mindful of not being too feminine. She was the first woman governor. She wanted to be taken seriously and didn't want to stand out and for anything other than her ideas. She cut her hair very short. She never wore a dress or a skirt or even much color, frankly. She wanted to be taken seriously. And she served at a really tough time in Michigan history. She did a very good job as our governor. And because she walked through the fire first, I can show up as I am, or more comfortably as I am. I'm also 54, and I'm at a stage in life where I don't have the energy or interest in trying to be something that I'm not. I've got to, be who I am, and I think it's very liberating to see younger generations that are coming after me who are very comfortable with who they are at a much earlier age than I ever was. And I take very seriously my duty to try to make it easier for those that come after me too.
Speaking of that, it's the young adult version of the book that's out this year. The original came out last year. And I think there should be a young adult version of every book, but for grown-ups as well, because it's such a fun, breezy, but really impactful read. And you walk through all of these life lessons. There's a Q&A with your two daughters at the end, which is really awesome. As a parent, I find it hard to explain to my kids what is going on in our country right now. How do we explain to our children why we're living in such a divided time?
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know that I'm an expert in child rearing. I have raised two kids, and I'm really proud of them. I think that the challenges that their generation confronts right now are so unique in terms of compared to what my life was like growing up. Raising kids at home during a time when there were people demonstrating with long guns on the front lawn of the governor's residence necessitated a lot of hard, very direct conversations earlier than I ever would have wanted to have them with my kids. I find that listening to my kids, I've learned a lot too. It is, when I talk a little bit about this in the book, but when I was in the state Senate, I revealed that I had been raped when I was in college. And it was during a floor debate. I had never shared it publicly. I only shared it with a handful of people over my life, but there was legislation that was moving through the Senate that would make it much harder for women to access reproductive health care. And so they wouldn't have a hearing with women or doctors. And so in hopes of trying to persuade some votes, I shared my story in trying to put a face on all the women that were going to be impacted by this. And yeah, I lost the debate that day. I didn't change a darn thing. It was very depressing. I had to call my dad on the way home from the state capitol to tell him because I knew this would be in the news. I had to talk to my young children about this, and obviously I'd try to do it in an age-appropriate way. But I went to work the next day, and hundreds of people had reached out to say that they had a similar story. And 10 years later, as governor, I signed the repeal of that very law. And I tell that story. Thank you. I tell that story because we are living through really hard times right now. These are important fights, and they are worth having. And sometimes it takes longer than it should to get the right result. It's harder than it should be many times, and yet we're in that right now. And that was the lesson that I was talking about in that chapter. But being really as honest as age appropriate with my kids, I've found was so helpful in in navigating all of the kind of trauma that we've taken on since I've been governor in particular, but certainly tough stuff that's going on. But, I don't know that I've got really constructive. I know you and I were chatting, you've got 3 boys and a little girl, and you worry about all the different, things that are competing for their attention, and, how I think isolated so many boys have been feeling in our country. And I think you're asking a really smart question, and I hope as you learn and as I learn that we do better, and that we don't see so many boys turning away or turning to destructive means.
That moment where you revealed that you were sexually assaulted on the House floor actually catapulted you into the national spotlight. How do you think about the way personal trauma, your own personal trauma, has sort of shaped and defined a big portion of your career?
I have had the benefit of talking with different therapists throughout my life. I got divorced. I went through couples therapy. I met an incredible therapist once, many years ago. I saw for, maybe a year or so. And we talked a lot about trauma. And one of the things I know is she used this analogy for me, and it's really helped me. I'm an optimist by nature, and I've learned to laugh in hard situations. I learned that skill from my mother. But finding, purpose in hard times can be really challenging. And she used this example. She said, every one of us is a ball of clay. And life sometimes carves things away from us. And it's not fair, it's not right, it's not deserved, but it happens. And I'm specifically thinking about my sexual assault when I was in college. Took away my sense of security, my sense of self, a number of other ways that it hurt me individually. She said, but it hollowed you out in a way, but it also made you a vessel that you can carry water. Now you have purpose. And I love that because I'm not suggesting that every horrible thing that happens, that there's a silver lining. There's not. But I have found purpose in that. It took me 25 years to find my voice as a survivor. I hadn't told anyone, and when I did, it was really scary. Mm-hmm. But now I count myself as not just a survivor, but an advocate, a force for good. And I know that this instance has driven me to make Michigan a better place, a safer place, a more just place. And I think that helps me make peace with some of that. Mm. Now, trauma, there's a lot, right? I think everyone probably has some traumatic event in their life. And the pandemic was traumatic for lots of people, right? Loss of loved ones, et cetera. The plot to kidnap and kill me, don't think I've processed yet, to be honest. And I'm going to have to do that at some point. And one of the things I talk about in the book is that I want to learn something in every conversation. Right. I love to listen to people. I love to ask questions. I want to learn something. And when you're listening, it makes you a better leader, and it's made me a better governor. I'd like to meet with maybe 1 or 2 of the plotters.
So I've been dying to ask you about this because I've seen that you've said that. First of all, what part of that still lives with you? Like, is there an ever-present fear? How do you even go to work every day?
First, I've got wonderful state police detail. They keep me safe. I've never worried about my individual safety because I'm with the state police 24/7. I worry about people around me when there were, threats, that people who didn't have the type of security that I have. But I do carry it with me. I go into rooms and I'm often scanning to see, is there anyone that looks like, they could be threatening. And it's a bummer because I love people. I would love nothing more than to walk into a diner and just sit down with a stranger and start talking, especially someone who looks like they have a very different reality than I do, because that's where I can learn something. That's where I can ask a question. What's going on in your life? What do you need? What stands in your way of achieving the life that you want? How can I help as governor? But I can't do that anymore, and it's a bummer. It's changed kind of my comfort level in just jumping in. Now I still do it when I get the opportunity, but those opportunities are harder and rarer.
And yet you want to talk to them.
I would like to understand.
Why?
I would like to understand, in a country of 330 million people, where lots of governors were doing the same thing that I was doing in terms of the directives, et cetera. There's only 12 who singled out a governor to kidnap and kill her. And those were my people. And I'd like to understand why. I'd like to ask the question, what was going on in your life? What was the assumption that you were making? What was happening so that I can understand why did this happen here? And maybe there's something to learn that'll make me a better governor or a better person. And maybe there's not. Maybe it would just be a waste of time. But I think it would be healing for me to even just be able to ask the question and be able to show one of the people. I don't want to sit with all 12 of them. But there were a couple who cooperated with the government and testified against their co-conspirators. And I wrote that I thought that should be taken into consideration when they were sentenced, because they helped in the end. But I'd like to ask that question. And I think it to show them that I'm just a human being too. I'm an ordinary person. I've got an extraordinary job, and I'm serving in extraordinary times. But I'm just a regular person like everyone else.
And this is a plot that was foiled. Luckily, we've recently seen that unimaginable violence against public figures can happen.
Yep.
What responsibility do leaders have to change the rhetoric, turn down the temperature?
A tremendous amount. I think anyone with a platform has a duty to speak out against it, to do everything to bring down the temperature. That's been the phrase I've been using since the beginning of the pandemic, when I looked out the window of my office, and I think there are pictures that I took from my phone that are in the book from my office window. They had a big demonstration at the Michigan Capitol. And, Michigan is a union state. There were Confederate flags on the Capitol lawn. There were Nazi, pictures of me with a Hitler mustache saying Heil Whitmer. I mean, there was someone carrying around a dark-haired Barbie with a noose on her neck. I couldn't believe what I was saying. The Whitmer's the reason we need the Second Amendment sign on a car right outside from my window. And I was taking pictures, and then it dawned on me, why am I standing in a window? These people have guns and they're writing. It's terrible. And I backed off, and I thought, but there's something going on in this country, and there are too many leaders who are fomenting the hate against one another. And I have personally asked everyone from the White House to my colleagues to turn down the temperature. We saw what happened to Nancy Pelosi's husband. We saw what happened in Minnesota. We saw what happened to Charlie Kirk. This doesn't get better unless we're all saying that it's unacceptable in this democracy and all using our platforms to turn down the hate.
President Trump told you he wouldn't pardon your alleged kidnappers. Is that what you want? And are you confident that he will keep that promise?
Yeah, I have talked to him twice about it. He made some off-the-cuff remarks that he was thinking about it, that he thought that they were railroaded or whatever. And I called him up and talked to him about it. And then I wrote him a letter about it as well. And I shared a bunch of information in that letter, as well as my statement at the sentencing, my victim impact statement. And has said he wouldn't, and he's not done it yet. And I'm hopeful that stands. So, I have been not shy about sharing what I need to get done in Michigan with this president. That's my job. I've also not been shy to call him up when I think he's wrong and tell him that I want him to consider this and ask that he does. And so far that issue is okay at the moment.
Well, let's speak about how that relationship has evolved. You walk through so many seminal moments in your career in the book. You get right into the pandemic right away. You issued some of the toughest stay-at-home orders in the country. Looking back, what would you say to yourself, and what would you do differently?
Well, I think if I could go back in a time machine with all the knowledge that we have today, of course I would do some things differently. I think every governor in the country, if they're being honest, would say the same thing. I mean, none of us wants to relive that, but it's also important to remember that the last pandemic was the 1918 flu. And we were talking to the best experts, and we were worried that, like 1918, it would disproportionately hit children. And so we took kids out of school. And that actually it was older adults that were more vulnerable in this pandemic. And that loss of schooling has been very challenging for our kids to recover from. And so that's just one example of, if I could go back with the knowledge we have now, how might we have done things a little bit different. But when I went on the national news and I said that the Trump administration did not have a national strategy, I don't regret doing that. It was accurate. It was the truth. I was trying to desperately get masks and gloves and PPE for our doctors and nurses. Detroit was one of the hot spots at the same time New York, Chicago, and New Orleans were. We had refrigerated trucks outside of our hospitals because we had so many, our morgues were full. And we didn't even have gloves, and doctors were wearing masks. Like, I just wanted the basics. And the response was, we're not a shipping clerk, go find it yourselves. And so I went on the national news because I was desperately looking for these items. And we got a lot of help after that, but the White House was very angry that I made that observation, and that's when I started getting called that woman from Michigan.
This is the chapter called "Don't Let the Bullies Get You Down." So this policy and some of the things you said put you in the direct line of fire of President Trump. How do you think that's shaped the way that your career as governor has unfolded?
Well, ironically, I mean, when he singled me out, the people of Michigan rallied in my defense. It was really interesting. I mean, the legislature didn't. It was completely Republican-controlled legislature at the time in Michigan. And as soon as the public attack came, they'd been going along with my orders up until then. And as soon as that happened, everything changed. They fought me. They sued me. They tried to recall me. I mean, it got really ugly in our state capitol. But the Etsy community turned out and started making That Woman from Michigan T-shirts and coffee mugs and bumper stickers, et cetera. I mean, I got so much of That Woman from Michigan stuff. It was very heartening. And it was funny because I was going to the office to do one of my, bi-weekly, 2-3 times a week, I would do a press conference talking about the COVID numbers and what we were going to do. And I was going to the office, and a gal on my team, Shaquila Myers, is a Black woman from Detroit who has worked with me most of my career, said, "You know what they're calling you in Detroit, Governor?" And I was like, "Oh God, what?" I mean, I was getting a lot of threats at this time, and I was just like, "What?" And she said, "Big Gretch." Now, I'm named after both my grandmothers, Grandma Gretchen and Esther. So my name is Gretchen Esther Whitmer. And Grandma Gretchen had a hard and fast rule: you never shorten the name Gretchen. Gretch rhymes with wretch, and that ain't pretty. So I've always just kind of recoiled if people call me Gretch, because Grandma burnt that into my brain. And I don't really know many women who want big on the front of their name. So I hear Big Gretchen, I'm like, what is this? Why would they call me this? And she said, no, you don't understand. This is a sign of success, of the adoration. They love you. Big Gretch, they're calling you Big Gretch because you're not letting the White House push you around. You're standing in the way and keeping us safe. And it is now my absolute favorite nickname, Big Gretch. And Grandma Gretchen is rolling in her grave somewhere. But it is, it was one of those things that it was so heavy. And every time that a tweet would come out that would mention Michigan, I would get more threats. Every time I was singled out, I would get more threats. And my heart would sink, because I was so worried that I wouldn't be able to get the masks and gloves that I needed. I didn't care about me. I was worried that they would stand in the way of me helping the people of Michigan. And I think that was the biggest concern. When he was reelected, I went into a dark place for a while. I worked really hard to support President Biden's reelection and then ultimately Kamala Harris's election. I went to the convention and felt hopeful and joyful and thought, maybe we can do this. I knew it was going to be hard. Michigan was going to be hard. I worked with Tony Evers from Wisconsin and Josh Shapiro from Pennsylvania, and we did a bus tour in our 3 states together. Your governor came in and helped us too. I mean, it was always going to be close. But when we fell short, it wasn't just in Michigan. We lost all swing states. And it wasn't by massive margins, but they were bigger than in 2016. And to kind of take that in and to realize all that could happen because of that, it was really depressing. I was in a dark place. I turned off the television. I left social media. I just needed to clear my head. Spent maybe a month doing that, and I watched 8 seasons of Dexter. Yes, I turned to a serial killer to cheer me up.
Yeah.
But I learned about myself. I sleep better at night if I go to bed tired. If I'm tuned out, my anxiety gets worse and I cannot sleep. And I'm no good to anybody. And so I knew this about myself, but I needed to be reminded, and I needed that break. But I thought long and hard. I took an oath to the people of Michigan. And I got 2 years left as governor, and I got a lot of things I want to get done. And so I am going to continue to do everything in my power to protect the people of Michigan and do the job that I have. And I've decided, that's got to be my North Star. That's the oath I took, and that's how I've been navigating this. And that's why, I called him when the question about pardoning those, the plotters. That's why I went to the Oval Office, because I need to make sure that I get FEMA relief for my ice storm victims in Michigan, and I got it. It doesn't mean that I withhold, that I don't join every lawsuit against the administration, like the SNAP lawsuit we all filed together yesterday. It doesn't mean that I don't do everything to undermine their efforts to take Medicaid dollars away from people and states and health systems and nurses and doctors. And so I have tried to figure out how I can do both. I'm going to fight for the people of Michigan, and I'm going to fight the administration when they're wrong and they hurt the people of Michigan.
So speaking of learning to listen, you've chosen to work with the Trump administration when you feel you can, unlike governors like Gavin Newsom, Governor Pritzker, and you have gotten some investments in Michigan. Can you talk about the pros and cons of that effort?
Yeah, so, I love what my colleagues are doing. And I think when you look at our states, we're different states, right? I keep telling people we have to think about this as an Avenger-style defense, right? I mean, Gavin Newsom is able to do some things in California, like redistricting, hopefully on Tuesday. Please vote yes. There you go. That are not possible for me to do in Michigan. J.B. Pritzker is being targeted by the administration. Chicago, what's happening in Chicago is wrong, and he has to fight back. That's not currently happening in Michigan. And I've got I've got a Republican House of Representatives and a Democratic Senate, and I've got to do everything I can to get my agenda accomplished and protect and do more for the people of Michigan. So I think we've got to give the encouragement and grace for everyone to show up to the fight the way that they can. You look at Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania. We're similar, but he's got a different situation too. And Tony Evers in Wisconsin. Like, I keep going back to the Avenger style. Like, everyone has a role to play, and everyone's got to play the role.
What do you think of Governor Newsom's communication style? Some might call it trolling of President Trump.
I'm here for it, baby.
But it's very different than yours.
Well, I mean, like I said, I've got a state where I've got to work with a Republican legislature. One branch is Republican, one's Democratic. Michigan is a very purple state. I am still above water in popularity in a state like Michigan going into year 8. That's unheard of. The best way that I can help make sure that we've got long-term strategy is to protect that and make sure that we've got a leader who follows me that has the same values and is going to fight to protect Michigan elections, Michigan people, and fight to hold Washington accountable when they're wrong. And the best way for me to do that in Michigan is to be the best damn governor of Michigan I can be.
The photo that you took in the Oval Office, where you covered your
I
face
didn't
with
take
the
that
binder.
photo. I tried not to take that photo.
Someone took the photo. You covered your face with a binder. It seems emblematic to me of the running towards fire lesson that you talk about in your book. How would you describe what happened there?
Well, you know what? We had, in Michigan, we've got a base in Macomb County, Michigan. It is a National Air Guard base. We have needed to recapitalize a fighter mission there for a decade. Every person in my role and in our U.S. Senate has tried to get this done, and we've not been able to get it done. I've tried to get it done under the last administration, my very friendly Biden administration. We were very aligned in all of our values. It didn't get over the finish line. And I had a duty to try to go to the White House and get it done. And I had a commitment from the president that day to get it done, which is why I was at the Oval Office. I was not there for all the things that were signed and all the rhetoric that day. In fact, I was furious that they walked me into that room. I actually left the room. No one reported that. I walked out of it in the back. But while I was moving from the front of the room, when it became clear what was happening there to the back, they must have taken more pictures of me than anyone else in the room, because one of these things is not like the other, right? And so I was furious, and they kept turning around and taking pictures, and so I was just trying to get out of the room. And of course, that ends up in the New York Times, and all the pundits in D.C. say, oh, she's just ruined all of her political future, da-da-da-da-da. I don't care what any of them say. The people of Michigan understand that I was there to get that mission done at Selfridge, and I got it done. I got it done under this president who that woman from Michigan was able to get in there and get it done. And so the way that I've explained it to people is, I've gotten death threats for standing up to the administration to protect people in the middle of a pandemic. I get ridiculed by pundits for showing up at the Oval Office to get a fighter mission for Michigan. And some people don't understand it, but fortunately the people of Michigan do, and have elected me twice in one of the most purple states in the country by double-digit numbers. And Republicans and independents have crossed over to vote for me in my state. And so I know the state of Michigan better than anybody, and I've been elected, and I'm going to continue to fight for the people of Michigan, and that's what they expect me to do.
Do you have any concern, though, that that's cost you in terms of your reputation, long-term or short-term?
I don't. I don't, because I'm doing what I know to be the right thing for the state of Michigan. And when I took that oath of office, I take it very seriously. And that means not putting myself first, not putting my personal safety first, not putting my personal political ambitions first. It means doing the job first, putting public service first. That's what we're supposed to do.
Well, speaking of public service, I've heard you say if the country gets a cold, Michigan gets the flu.
Yes.
What is your view of the government shutdown? How is it impacting real people in Michigan? Are they at a pain point?
I think, we're all at a pain point. The SNAP lawsuit that we Democratic governors filed yesterday, it shows that we are going to have millions of people who are going to go hungry because of this shutdown. Meanwhile, the things that they want to do are still operating in Washington, D.C., except for food for people who need it desperately. When I say that when the country gets a cold, Michigan gets the flu, it's really about, the economy. I'm thinking about tariffs. The chaotic tariff policies are hurting us more than any other state. And here's why. Michigan, we're so much more sensitive to the impact of tariffs because of our location and because of what we do. We are a heavy manufacturing state, disproportionately in autos, and we're a big agriculture state. Second most diverse agriculture in the country, second to California, but second most diverse in the country. And so tariffs disproportionately hurt us. The Canadian tariffs especially. Auto parts go back and forth over the Michigan-Canadian border. The biggest border crossing in this country is in Detroit, Michigan. It is Detroit to Windsor. And there is, the amount of commerce that goes through there. So these tariffs and this latest 10% extra, because he doesn't like an ad that the Premier of Ontario put together, hurts us more than any other state. And so I'm really worried about how people are doing, not just from the shutdown, but from the tariff chaos. I think the punitive nature of all of this is hurting people all across our country, but especially acutely in Michigan.
Have the carve-outs for automakers been enough?
It's helped to some extent, but no, because it still, you see automakers who are going to try to figure out how to either pull everything into the country or put everything out and just pay the tariff once coming in. And I don't think that they've figured out that in manufacturing, these are years-long, decades-long investments and plays. You don't just set up a manufacturing facility in months. I mean, this is not something that happens overnight, and that's why the capricious nature of these tariffs is just either paralyzing or they're pulling out investment.
I'm going to ask the first question from the audience on this note. In light of recent discussions about trade, tariffs, and Michigan auto supply chain, how are you positioning Michigan in the global economy while protecting local jobs? And then it says in caps, go Gretsch.
Or does it say go green?
Go green. Actually, it says go green, but I think it could say go Gretsch, too.
Go white. I think, I was really so pleased that under the last administration, we were incentivizing investment in alternative energy sources, clean energy sources, that we had saw some long overdue investments that in batteries and, I think green energy, and we've had a lot of setbacks in the last, 10 months on all of those fronts. One of the things that we are doing in Michigan, we stole a headquarters from Florida because it was Perrigo, which is they make generic pharmaceuticals. We stole them in the middle of a pandemic because Michigan believes in science, just so you know. And they're in science, they want to be somewhere, but we're really working to diversify our economy, but we've got to continue to evolve our auto industry. And maybe it's hybrids while people slowly make their way into EVs, but we can't slow down, we can't stop. The world is moving, and we have to continue to be on the leading edge of it if we have any hope of long-term holding on to important manufacturing jobs. We've made huge investments in our people, too. It used to be that one of the big draws of Michigan, in our heyday, was People came from around the world to Michigan for a job that would get you right into the middle class. It's why we have such a diverse population in the state. You know, for a Midwest state, we're really the most diverse of many Midwest states, and certainly of all the swing states. And that's why people came from everywhere for this opportunity. You can't just get into the middle class without education beyond high school nowadays. And that education is priced out of possibility for a lot of people. And so through efforts to bring down the cost of a four-year degree, open up more paths into apprenticeships and into the trades, we have really increased our skill sets in Michigan too, which is another important thing that we've done to protect our workforce and to make sure that we're an attractive place for business to invest.
So as you mentioned, big election coming up in a few days. What do you think about efforts to redraw congressional maps across the country? And do you think the president and Republicans are weaponizing redistricting?
Absolutely they are. And it's horrid. And thank you for doing it too.
How confident are you that there will be free and fair elections?
I think we all have to take it very seriously. I'm very worried about it. You know, I know that people want to have the 2028 conversation right now. I think that's a big mistake. We've got 2026 is going to be an absolutely essential election. We're going to have over 20 governor's races on the ballot in 2026. We're going to have crucial congressional races on the ballot in Michigan. Governor, Secretary of State, Attorney General, and a U.S. Senate seat are all open seats next year. So the outcome of these races could have an even bigger impact. In Michigan right now, redistricting is not a possibility. It's not a threat. It's also not a possible strength. If the elections on all those races I just listed go the wrong way, that could change. Mm-hmm. And that's why I can't take my eye off the ball for 2026. And I feel like we've got an opportunity here, but we can't assume that we're going to get it just because it's a midterm. We've got a lot of work to do.
San Francisco just was in the news, flurry of news about the threat of sending the National Guard here. If President Trump wanted to send the National Guard to Detroit, what would you do?
You know, J.D. Vance was in Michigan and offered to do that, and I declined.
Well, you know, I've actually covered technology in depth for most of my career, and I know you want to bring more tech to Michigan, and it was tech CEOs were reportedly involved in some of these discussions or in the president's ear about it. This is a very powerful cohort of people that seems to now be very close to the administration. How do you feel about Silicon Valley's right turn?
I am very worried that there are a handful of voices in this country that are influencing and impacting things that impact every one of us. They don't have the right perspective or motivations, and it concerns me a great deal. I think that, you know, I guess I'm grateful that some of those voices were willing to support the city of San Francisco and keep the guard out from descending on the city. But it's really disheartening, not the right turn of tech in particular, but the way that our country is, the very few and the very powerful are the ones that are making all the decisions and benefiting from it. And it's antithetical, I think, to who we are supposed to be and who I like to think we are. What do you think?
All right. So you've got a sold-out crowd in California. I think they're here for maybe one reason in particular. Governor Newsom, former Vice President Kamala Harris have both made it clear they're thinking about running in 2028. Some people would like to see a Midwestern option.
I heard J.B. Pritzker's looking at it.
How are you thinking about this? To your sold-out audience in California, are you considering it?
You know, when I came out of my dark Dexter depression, I decided I'm best going to spend my energy in a couple of ways. One is getting the rest of my agenda accomplished before I walk out the door, as much of as I possibly can. Two, I've created an organization called Fight Like Hell, and we are recruiting and training candidates to run for office. I figure if I can win by 11 points in a state like Michigan, we've got a strategy and a plan that can be replicated in other places that aren't solid blue. And so that is giving me a lot of inspiration right now and makes me feel like we can do this. Third is I am heightening my role in working with the Democratic Governors Association on these races next year. I'm going to be helping my colleagues and helping make sure that we've got good Democrats in office who are going to fight redistricting efforts, who are going to live our values, and I think show the leadership that the country needs to see that when Democrats lead, we make people's lives better. We focus on the things that are important to America's families. And that gets me through 2026, and then I don't know what's next. And that's the honest truth, but I'm not going to say yes to anything or no to anything, because 12 months is a long time in this world. We're only 10 months into this administration, so think about that. But I feel like that's the best use of my time and energy right now, are those three things. And I mean, I need to stay focused.
Would you rule it out?
I can't rule anything out at this juncture.
Okay. So,
that being said, we've got a great bench of talented people in this country right now, and I am honored to even be considered among them. But honest to God, my colleagues are doing some really important work, and I'm grateful for them.
so another version of this question, but slightly different. Some have suggested.
Let
that
it go, Emily.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Well, I think this is an important one.
Yeah.
Some have suggested that Democrats shouldn't put a woman forward for president or vice president because of how other elections have panned out. What do you take away from the American electorate's stubborn refusal to elect a woman president?
Well, first of all, I think that's just BS. I do. I really do. You look at the last election, Alyssa Slotkin won our U.S. Senate race in Michigan, right? Tammy Baldwin got reelected in Wisconsin. I mean, women won up and down the ballot. And in a swing state like mine, right now, all 3 chief executive offices, women. Every one of us told us we can't have all women on the ballot. Guess what? Not only did we win the first time, we all got reelected as well. And so anyone who says, oh, that's the lesson from this last election, probably has their own agenda. I also just recoil when people say, we can't have a Californian as governor, because California is California, We can't have Pete Buttigieg because he's gay. We can't have Wes Moore because we're not ready for another black president. We can't, have a Jewish president. And I think all of that is baloney. You know what? If J.D. Vance is the standard bearer on the other side, my money's on any one of our people.
Okay. That said, you say
Can we elect a woman?
You say that
Yeah.
we have a strong bench, but I think even some Democrats feel there is a leadership vacuum in the Democratic Party. How do Democrats course correct?
I think there's a leadership vacuum in Washington, D.C. I do think so. I appreciate how hard the job is, and I appreciate that we all want to see the fight, and we want to coalesce around one phrase, one idea, one vision. And that's not going to happen for a little while. We don't have the House, we don't have the Senate, we don't have the White House. There are lots of leaders who are waging the fight in DC, but there's not going to be one for a little while. And it's not comfortable, and I know we don't like it. But I will also say that the nation's governors are not looking to DC for talking points. We're on the ground every day, leading in our states, and we're fighting back where we can and how we can. We're joined in our efforts to do so. And you know what, I think that Hakeem Jeffries is a very talented person. And Chuck Schumer has been doing this for a long time, and he's, been very successful at doing it. But to see, to want to have one person who can punch back every single time in the best way, best tested way, that's just not feasible right now. And I like the Avengers style approach because we have to see what people respond to. We have to see what is going to ignite the American people to get activated. And so I know it's kind of uncomfortable, but I think it's important for us to be seeing different leaders doing different things to see, all right, what is actually going to inspire people as we go into 26 and then into 28. We have a lot to learn. Mm-hmm. We have a lot to learn and a lot of work to do.
Well, speaking of different leaders or not, are you worried that President Trump will seek a third term?
He tells us what he's going to do, and he has brought this up recently, so I think we have to take it very seriously. And you know what? It would be nice if there were anyone on his side of the aisle that would stand up. None. It's amazing to me that Congress, the Speaker of the House, and the Senate Majority Leader passed budgets, said what their priorities were, and they're just spineless in standing up and saying, no, we are a check and balance. We are a separate branch. You cannot do this. But man, are they just a bunch of weaklings. It's really, and I know Liz Cheney did, and look what happened, and Adam Kinzinger did, and look what happened, and Mitt Romney was, independent. Look what happened. I mean, it is the magic of this one person, and I say magic not because I admire it, but I think it's a trick. The magic doesn't translate to anyone else, and it will not last forever. And so we got to get our ducks in the row, and we've got to be ready. And that's what I'm going to be working on for the next 14 months.
Okay. So in the name of getting ready, I know you've been visiting Trump-leaning areas in Michigan.
Yep.
Trying to listen to people and hear what they have to say. You're also running some trainings for, aspiring political candidates. What are you hearing?
I really do. When I ran the first time, I got into all 83 counties in Michigan. I went to places that most Democrats never bother showing up, the very red counties. I know California is a huge state. Michigan's a big state too, all right? We have 2 peninsulas. I always have my map. I love it. 2 peninsulas. And so when you're in Lansing, which is the capital of Michigan, you're as close to Washington, D.C. as you are to the western end of the Upper Peninsula. All right, so it takes a long time to cover this territory because it's not easy to get here. You got to go all the way over. And I spent a better part of a year and a half getting into all 83 counties. And my favorite thing to ask people was, if I'm fortunate enough to get elected, what could I do that'll make your life better? And people will tell you, they're not shy. You got to show up though, and you got to go to areas where you might not like what they say. And they might not treat you very nicely. You don't know, but you got to show up. And the thing that I heard the most in 2018 when I ran was, I just need you to fix the damn roads. I heard this in the Upper Peninsula. I heard this in Detroit. I heard it in Traverse City, Michigan. I heard it, every part of the state. This is what I heard. And so it started to become a part of my, mantra too. We're going to fix the damn roads. And people go crazy, about roads. So it was really interesting. But I was in the Detroit Children's Hospital, and there was a woman there who looked friendly, and I struck up a conversation with her. And she explained to me she was there to visit her son, who was having this spinal surgery. And she lived in Flint, so north of Detroit, about an hour drive back and forth, and she was there to see her son every day. And I said, tell me, if I'm fortunate enough to get elected, what could I do that'll make your life better? And she looked me in the eye and she said, fix the damn roads. and I was not expecting, like I'd heard it a million times, but I was not expecting it in that environment. I thought she'd talk about health care or childcare or education, something about kids. And so I said, all right, tell me why. Like, why is this the first thing out of your mouth? I need to understand. And she said she'd been driving back and forth, and she hit a pothole on her way to the hospital, and it busted the rim on her wheel, and it sidelined her for a whole day. She had to get towed and had to have her wheel replaced and a new tire put on, and it was hundreds of dollars out of her budget, so money out of her rent or for childcare. Meanwhile, her kids at home, she was paying childcare for on a day she didn't even get to see her sick child in the hospitals, who she missed that day. And it was one of those moments that it was like, okay, it's not really about the roads. It's about the ability to take care of your family, to get ahead. And so my favorite thing to do is to show up, especially in places where people don't expect me. You don't win a state like Michigan by 11 points if you just are expecting Democrats to vote for you. You win it by losing by less in red areas and winning by more in blue areas. But you got to show up to do it. And when we think about what's going to be the call to action in 2028, I don't know. But we're going to learn what it is from the American people by listening and showing up in places that people feel left behind. And when you think about how dejected maybe young men in our country feel, maybe it's because we haven't been talking to them. How we've lost ground with certain parts of our population. They've felt ignored or left out or taken for granted. We can't do that. We can't afford to do that. But when you do it, it focuses you on the things that really matter to people. And that's what people vote on. That's when James Carville says, "Is the economy stupid?" Fix the damn roads is about the economy, the personal economy, the daily economy. And that's why listening, I think, is a superpower. And that's why I devote a whole chapter to it in the book.
So another question from the audience. What's the best part of being the governor of Michigan, and what is the most challenging?
The best part, okay, there's the best perk of being governor of Michigan is there are 2 governor's residences in Michigan, and one is on Mackinac Island, which is up here. I do like, it's a treat to be able to go up there in the summers. It's a beautiful place. There's nothing like it in the world. Michigan is home to 20% of the world's fresh surface water. Even in Michigan, sometimes people it's there, we appreciate it, but that's a big deal. And I say the most challenging thing, when I talk to kids who visit the Capitol, every once in a while I'll be walking through and I'll stop and chat with them, and I'll say, do you know how many bosses I have? And I'm like, 12, or 50, and I say 10 million. And I said, do you think they all ever agree on anything? And I think that's the hardest part is, I love what I do. I'm grateful. Even on the hardest day, I feel really lucky to be the governor of Michigan. And I think sometimes the hardest thing is just being able to convey to people why a tough decision is being made. And I'm grateful that I've gotten reelected and people seem to believe in the work that I'm doing. But I also know that at any given time, there's at least 40% who don't agree with me, and I've had to make peace with that.
So what is the core message that you want to drive home to Americans right now?
I think that every one of us owns a piece of this democracy, and every one of us has a responsibility to take part in it, to fight for it. This is a really tense, hard moment. We can and will get through it. But the end result is dependent on all of us doing what we can do and doing our part.
Well, especially for the young adult audience. How do you think about encouraging young people to feel empowered the way you have felt empowered to be who you are and say what you want to say and wear the lipstick that you want to wear, especially in this environment?
I often talk about this young man, Henry, who started volunteering on my campaign when he was 16 years old. He would drive in, he was in high school, and he started working on the campaign. I've known him for 8 years now. He just graduated from college, and I hired him as one of my full-time team members. But Henry at 16 didn't even have a vote, but he made a big difference in my campaign, and he recruited people, and he brought the message to campuses, even as younger than most of the people he was talking to. He made a big difference, and young people have got the longest, most important stake in the outcome of any election, because they're going to live with the results and impact of it longer than any of the rest of us are. And so I love to encourage and listen to and try to plant seeds in our young people to run for office, to stay engaged in it. And when I do my trainings, the Fight Like Hell trainings, we got so many young people showing up. And in Michigan, we had the highest youth voter turnout in the country in 2022. And I think that's why.
Something to be proud of?
Something very much to be proud of.
All right. Big Gretch, everyone. Thank you. I hope I can call you Big Gretch.
Absolutely, my favorite nickname.
Thank you.
Thank you.